So I'll start the recording now. Welcome everybody. My name is Lauren Kerrison. I work for the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and today's session is about sexual and gender-based harassment. Now, this session is being recorded. If you've got any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or place them in the chat, and I can answer them as we go. If not, at the end, I'll finish the recording and we can go through any questions that you've got as well. So this session today is entirely around a new code of practice that's come out on sexual and gender-based harassment. Came out in December 2023, and we're still waiting for our minister to accept the code in Tasmania, but we are pretty sure that will be accepted, and we've already got psychosocial hazards accepted in Tasmania as well. So this is kind of adds on a bit further to that and obviously speaks in more depth about sexual and gender-based harassment. Most of the information that I've been going through today is straight out of this codes of practice, so it is a great resource to ensure that you read after this session as well. I will say usually we keep these slides not very wordy, but unfortunately it is quite a in-depth topic and it's quite broad, so there is a lot of content to go through, but it is only 20 slides long, will be recorded. You'll be given a copy of the recording and a copy of the code of practice as well at the end of this session. So for anybody that's not familiar, if you don't know what sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advance, unwelcome request for sexual favours, or other unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature which makes a person feel offended, humiliated or intimidated, where a reasonable person would anticipate that reaction in those circumstances. Sorry, I'm still admitting people into the session. And then gender-based harassment. So sexual harassment can be a form of gender-based harassment. The term gender-based harassment is used in this code to describe unwelcome conduct based on a person's gender, sex, or sexuality. Now we'll get the wordier part of it out of the way to start with. So what might sexual or gender-based harassment look like? And in the code, they give a lot more examples than the ones that I've placed up on the slide here. So this is just a few. Basically, sexual and gender-based harassment can be a one-off incident or repeated behaviour. The most serious acts, such as sexual assault, may constitute criminal offences. It may be obvious or it may be subtle. And now here's just a few examples out of the code. Again, there are a lot more in there. Actual or attempted rape or sexual assault, physical assault, inappropriate physical contact, being followed, sexual comments about a person's appearance or clothing, comments, insults or jokes, deliberately misgendering somebody or using incorrect pronouns, intrusive questions or comments about a person's private life, for example, their relationship status, physical appearance or bodily functions, sexually explicit images being shared or threatening to share images of somebody, repeated or inappropriate invites to go out on dates or advances for requests of pleasure for sex or other sexual acts, comments about a person's sexual performance or appearance. Again, there's quite a lot of examples mentioned in the codes of practice as well. They're just a few. Sorry, I'm omitting a few more. Welcome those that have just joined. The session is being recorded. If you've got any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or if you're not comfortable, we can go through them at the end when the recording has finished. Thank you. Oh, I've got a few more again. And I will just quickly cover off workers under 18 because it does mention them a little bit further on. So workers who are minors, and that is those that are under 18, may be particularly vulnerable to sexual or gender-based harassment. Several factors may make these workers more vulnerable. Sexual and gender-based harassment is driven by a power imbalance. Minors are likely to perceive that they have less power than older workers, regardless of the workplace hierarchy. Minors are likely to have less experience recognising harassment behaviours, and they may also feel less confident calling it out. Sexual behaviours directed at workers under the age of 18 may constitute child-based sexual offences. Children often see grooming behaviours as friendship and may not identify the risks. If you have workers under the age of 18, you must ensure that you have identified the hazards that they may be exposed to in the workplace. And we'll go through some steps on how you can do that shortly. So who is affected by all this? So while anyone can experience sexual or gender-based harassment, there are certain groups of people who are more likely to experience it. Both men and women experience sexual harassment. However, women are significantly more likely to experience it than men. And men are significantly more likely to experience, women are significantly more likely to experience it than men, and men are significantly more likely to commit sexual or gender-based harassment than women. Factors which may increase the likelihood of a worker experience sexual or gender-based harassment include those on the screen here. So workers who are new to the workforce, workers under the age of 30, LGBTIQA plus workers, workers who do not conform to traditional gender stereotypes, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, workers with a disability, workers from cultural or different backgrounds, migrants, workers holding temporary visas, or people in insecure working arrangements such as labour hire or casuals. Again, anybody can experience sexual harassment or gender-based harassment. This is just statistically those that are more likely to experience it. This is something that you should consider when doing your risk assessment as well. So what are the impacts of sexual and gender-based harassment? So sexual and gender-based harassment can cause physical and psychological harm to the person is directed at, and anyone witnessing the behaviour as well. Furthermore, this can lead to significant social and economic costs for the worker, their family, and the organisation and the wider community. Some examples here include decreased job satisfaction, emotional and cognitive reactions such as loss of confidence and less self-esteem, irritability, anger, etc. Behavioural changes such as withdrawal or substance abuse, physical injuries as a result of assault, physical reactions such as headaches, ingestion, tiredness, illnesses such as there above, and that's due to stress usually. Stress, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts. So these are just some of the impacts that we see from sexual or gender-based harassment. So quite significant. Now, who has a duty under the new code of practice in this area? So there are 4 duty holders. For those that aren't very familiar with them, we've got the PCBU, which is the person conducting a business or undertaking, and that is basically the employer, so the business name on the pay slips. So a PCB must ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, workers and other persons are not exposed to risks to their psychological or physical health and safety, including risks from psychosocial hazards such as sexual or gender-based harassment. A PCBU must eliminate health and safety risks at work, or if that is not reasonably practicable, minimise them. These words are basically the same for most hazards and risks in the workplace, and they have been specifically mentioned, as said here, in the psychosocial code of practice that was released last year as well. So officers, and if you don't know what officers are, they're, for example, company directors. They must exercise due diligence to ensure the business or undertaking complies with the WHS duties. This includes taking reasonable steps to ensure the PCB has and uses appropriate resources and processes to eliminate and minimise risk. And we'll go through some examples of what they can be in a couple of slides as well. But a real quick example of that is policies and procedures and risk assessments and things along those lines. Then we've got workers. So workers have obligations as well under the Act, and regarding this topic, workers must take reasonable care for their own psychological and physical health and safety, and take reasonable care not to adversely affect the health and safety of others. Workers must comply with reasonable health and safety instructions so far as they are reasonably able, and cooperate with any reasonable policies and procedures by the employer as well. Lots of words of reasonable there, but if you've attended any of the other sessions before, we go through why they use that word in the legislation a lot as well. Now, we're not just referring, well, we are in this session referring to WHS laws and regulations. However, there's other legal frameworks when it comes to these topics. So WHS laws do not operate in isolation, and other laws may also apply. And here's just a couple examples here on the screen: workplace relations, criminal, anti-discrimination, privacy, workers' compensation laws, and sexual discrimination and the Positive Duties Act. So they can work in conjunction depending on what the sexual or gender-based harassment is. Let me just let one more person in. Okay. So we'll move into more what we can do now that we've kind of gone through what it is. So what to do next? To meet your duties to ensure health and safety, you as the PCB, must eliminate or minimise the risks of sexual and gender-based harassment so far as you're reasonably practicable. There's a code of practice on how to manage WHS risks in the workplace. And if you haven't read through that one, I recommend that you do, because what we're going through next is basically out of that code as well, but it is referred to in this new code that we're talking about today. So those that aren't too familiar with what a risk assessment process is or this code, there's 4 steps. The first step is to identify the hazard. Number 2 is to assess the risk. 3 is to control the hazards, and 4 is to review those control measures. So if we go through each of those steps now, step 1, identifying sexual and gender-based harassment. Identifying the risks of sexual and gender-based harassment involves understanding situations in which it could occur, including when and where, for example, at the usual workplace while making deliveries, email, etc. How it could occur from contact with customers or public, the potential nature of the harassment, for example, verbal or physical, and who is likely to be affected. So you'd go through the code of practice or some of those more vulnerable groups of people and identify whether or not you have those in the workplace as well. Just admitting one more person. And I just got a question come through. Will we receive a copy of these slides? Yes, you will. You'll get a copy of these slides. You'll get a copy of the code of practice, and you'll get a link to where the recording will be uploaded as well. So you can run through this training with your own workers if you wish. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Here's a couple of methods of how you can identify these hazards. So one is to consult with workers. Consulting can be going up and asking them. It can be HSRs, could be, one-on-one conversations. If you have toolbox talks. 2 is to collect and review data and information. That can be through like surveys, for example. Consider work tasks and the design of the work, and we'll go through that in the next 2 more slides, I think. 4, consider the physical work environment. Observe and consider work and behaviours. Consider workforce structure, demographics and culture, and have a reporting mechanism to encourage reporting, which is really important as well. So if it does occur, what is the reporting process? So number 2, after we have identified those hazards, we then move to assessing the risk. So we look at duration. How long is a worker exposed to the risk? Is it frequent? How often could this occur? And what is the severity of the harassment potentially in your workplace? If you're not too familiar on how to assess a risk or do a risk assessment, we have a session uploaded on our YouTube channel on how to conduct a risk assessment. Or if you'd like something more specifically for you and your business, I can also run yourself or your workers through risk assessment training, and that's free of charge as well. So controlling the risks. Here's just a couple examples of how you can control the risk, which is number 3 here on the wheel. Again, this doesn't suit every situation, but here's just some examples. Communicate with workers working alone. So those that are working alone are more, or they have a higher chance of being or experiencing sexual or gender-based harassment. So just checking in with them. Ensure transparent and fair systems for allocating of work and grants of promotion and training opportunities, etc. Ensure breaks are in a safe and visible location. Have policies and procedures in place to ensure managers have resources. So managers can't do what they don't know, so make sure that they receive some training and resources in this space. Avoid the use or need for workers to use their personal phones, social media, and emails. It's easier for things to be monitored through work accounts, work emails, work systems, whereas if there's a requirement for people to use their personal social media or emails, it can't be monitored by the workplace and therefore opens up potentially for these instances to be occurring. Provide ongoing supervision and support for workers, especially those that are more vulnerable. Supervision doesn't mean that you need to be babysitting them or being with people 24/7, but making sure there is management or supervisor presence and that there is somebody that is monitoring the workplace to some effect. Set, model and enforce acceptable behaviours and standards for people in the workplace. So the standard you walk by is a standard you accept. Make sure that you are working in the correct or within the correct standards, and that if you see anything that you are reporting it as well. Information, training, instructions and supervision is also really, really important. So make sure that you are getting resources out there for people, making sure there's processes in place for if an incident occurs that they know what to do, that you've got policies in place, etc. But definitely some training for your workers or definitely your managers at a minimum. So then we've got step 4, which is the review side, or maintain and review. So review and control measures should be done regularly and must be done when the control measure is not eliminating or minimising the risk so far as reasonably practicable. Before a change at the workplace is likely to give rise to a new or different health and safety risk, if it's a new hazard or risk that's been identified, if the results of consultation indicate a review is necessary, and if a HSR requests a review. So basically, things are always evolving and changing. If you put in a bullying and harassment policy, it's probably a good idea to review that after a year or two, because maybe a new code's come out or maybe some new guidance materials have come out in that space as well. So that is kind of all we're going to talk about as far as risk assessments, how to conduct a risk assessment. Again, it's its own training session. I didn't want to dive too deeply into that today. If that is something that you're interested in going through, please reach out to me after this session and we can organise a session for yourself. Or alternative, like I said, we've got it on our YouTube channel, a previous session that I would have taken everybody through as well. Unfortunately, sexual harassment or gender-based harassment or even psychosocial hazardous situations do and have occurred in the workplace previously. So when these do occur, you need to make sure, or if they occur, that you have a good investigation policy. You know how to respond to these situations. You've got reporting processes in place, etc., for if and when these situations do arise. And some general guidance that's out of the guide is here. So an investigation may itself introduce WHS risks. These risks may be eliminated or minimised so far as reasonably practical. So ensure the investigation is fair, transparent and timely. Ensure the investigation is impartial and takes a non-biased approach, especially in environments with a lack of diversity, including in management and leadership. Ensuring decision-making are appropriate. Those making the decisions are appropriately trained, they're unbiased, etc. Ensuring due process for both those who raise the issues and any workers who have had allegations made against them or about them. Taking a trauma-informed approach, which is referred to specifically in the code. Ensuring workers have access to support, so this could be like an EAP provider. Maintaining appropriate privacy and confidentiality at all times, and ensuring appropriate information about the outcome of any investigation is provided to the individuals or those that are involved in this situation. So what's next? I will be sending the slides through to you. I'll be sending a copy of the Code of Practice and a copy of the recording. I recommend that you risk assess your psychosocial hazards, your sexual harassment or gender-based harassment hazards in the workplace. And of course, we're here for support if you require more. Now I'll just turn off the recording.